and start the webinar. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just do a direct comparison between Unify 12 and Unify 13 in terms of interface, and I'll take you through the major changes that happened within that. So for those who don't know, this screen that we're looking at right now is Unify 13, the upgraded interface. And going back to Unify 12, I've almost forgotten what it looked like now already, having been on the new one for about 3 months now. So it was a bit difficult to let go after 15 years, but there it is in its glory, former glory. And basically, as you look at that and then compare to the new, what you'll see is this top level's completely disappeared, as has this filtering layer. And so I'll go into Unify 13 and just demonstrate that. So the bottom level tabs are now the main level tabs up the top here. And compare here, you can see the same type of tabs existing along here. We don't want to lose that functionality though. That top tab set was important to us, and that has now come in via the filtering system that happens through this pop-up modal on the right-hand side. So it's still there, it still exists, it's just the way you access it is different. So I'm in exactly the same screen as, not the same database, so the data is different, but as this particular screen here, it's my work summary, and I'm looking at all projects, and it's my work that I need to do. And so when I look at here, this is a table of information rather than a tree, and I can scroll down and see the information that I'm accessing, and I know I'm in my work via this chip over here. There's a filtering layer in here that kind of existed, but was only of limited benefit. It only had one drop down, which was a date drop down, and now the view is more advanced, and you've got overdue next 7 days, next 30, and schedule. There's an option to filter this list of work that you've got to do here. Overdue items only, or and what we've added as well into that is a filter on the type of information, the issues assigned to you. We're getting bombarded with requests to enter the webinar at the moment, documents, contracts, etc. And this categorization list is basically a consolidation of the way you categorize bits of this system. So documents have a template name, issues have a category, risks have a category, so you can filter on those and get that information into your list as well. And again, there's only one there for me there on that one. So going back to all in all, that's some extra functionality that exists within there. So if I wanted to change that view and not view my work, I would be changing this modal filter. But just before I do, one of the other things that you'll notice within this view is another part of the new feature, which instead of there being buttons and lots more panels, we now have what we call a second subnav. Because this was the bottom level, if we go back to our preview one, this was the bottom level, that was the lowest navigation. We always had buttons to do things, to actually navigate. Anytime you see a button now is when you're actually doing an action like saving or adding. And so now we have this subnav. So if I had anything to sign off in here, there would have been another panel. Now there's a subnav and I tick on that and I get what I need to sign off, and I can go back to tasks or sign off and toggle within those. And so you'll see that permeate throughout the entire system. Contracts will have a subnav. Lots of modules will have this subnav type concept. So in my work summary, instead of clicking on the portfolio tab here to go to portfolio summary, I now, that's old school, in the current system, I just remove this chip. I'm now in portfolio summary. So again, the same view, the same functionality, but portfolio, it's basically the entire project list for this fictitious company, rather than just the work I've got to do, the actual activities I'm working on. Now, within these dashboards, normally people will use these filtering layers to filter a subset of that information. In Unify 13, you now click this modal pop-up. So you'll see sector, project type, service line, location, lifecycle are there. That's that filtering layer that existed in the old, as the old tabs here. So if I wanted to go back to my work, I would select my work and click apply. My portfolio, which is the things you need to manage. The difference between my portfolio and my work is that my work are things you need to do, so issues and contracts and documents and risks that you need to physically do something on, do an action or sign off or create. Whereas in my portfolio, it'll have other things that other people need to do, but you need to be aware of because it's on the project that you're working on. Whereas portfolio is global, it's everything that's in the system that isn't marked as a private project, so you can see everything. So if I wanted to see, for example, just the commercial projects, I select commercial, I click apply, and that chip comes in again and I get a subset. If I do multiple selections within here, I get multiple chips. So those chips just expand out, and obviously the filtering comes into this screen in here. Some of these buttons you wouldn't see depending on your access level. I'm logged in as the all-seeing, all-dancing system administrator, and so there may be some changes there between what you see and what I'm seeing and demonstrating in this presentation. So by closing those chips, I'm now back to the all portfolio view. And I just wanted to show, while in this view, another piece of new feature, if you like, that didn't exist in the old. In this dashboard that we've got, which you can add and edit your own columns if you're an administrator to create different things within it, you can actually create a number of different views. And one that's standard, so these are customized ones, these are ones that we've built within this application, and your particular application can have your own views by adding them here. But if I select task, this is not a custom one, this comes with all deployments. And basically what it does is it shows me all of the activity that's going on across the portfolio, not just mine. So it's the same view as my work, it's very similar to my work, but instead of just being my work, it's the entire portfolio. And I can then filter that down and see what Arthur's working on. If I want to say just the issues that he's working on, I can select that. And again, what's overdue, and start to harass him and make him feel uncomfortable. So that's a pretty powerful view. People were running reports and things like that in the past, and I just wanted to highlight it there because it is kind of embedded down in this portfolio view. So yeah, try that one out when you get upgraded. It's quite handy. I use it all the time. And I'll go back to my standard. Now, there's a couple of tabs in the old system that I haven't shown you where they sit now. We've shown my work, my portfolio, and portfolio. They're now a filter option. All of these filter options are in the same modal as my work, my portfolio, and portfolio. But methodology, dashboards, reports, and admin, which only exists for system admin, but these tabs we haven't shown. These are the main tabs of the system. We now call them modules rather than tabs. And for these ones, we need to introduce the Hamburger, which isn't the greatest thing to do when it's 12:15 at lunchtime for those on the east coast of Australia. But that's okay, I'll let my stomach rumble and I'll introduce the Hamburger, which is this three-lined object here. So if you want to go and access reports or view the dashboard or view the methodology, you would click that Hamburger and you get those options. We've renamed admin to be configuration, and we've pulled out a lot of the things that were configured under methodology into configuration. So to go back to the modules, you can access them here as well as across the top, and that mainly exists for mobile access. This scales well and has good functionality for scaling for a mobile phone, and you would access your modules through there. But if I wanted to access reports or dashboards, that's where I'm going now. And so you'll see that the dashboards are the same. If I go to dashboards here, my sub-nav tabs are the same. Sorry. Summary, time, submission, customer issues. This has got a couple of extra ones. And the graphs within them are the same as you've got within the current application. No additional things there, but the way you access them is different through the Hamburger. Similarly with reports, Hamburger, reporting, reports, and again, there's no real change there. There's a sub-nav that matches the sub-nav that existed in the old system when going to reports, and then you've got your list of reports to view and run. And when you run a report, the report itself is exactly the same as it was in Unify 12. Okay, so one of the big improvements within the application in Unify 13 is this big filter here. So the one filter that we didn't put into the modal was the project filter. And what we've done with that is we've improved the ability to find project information. So, you know, this is a little business that runs in parallel to Unify. It hasn't got many projects, but in many of the clients who are on the phone now, you'll have a long list. I would still access them through my portfolio if I was managing a portfolio of projects, but if I'm a director or senior person and I'm always in portfolio, you don't need to browse. You can, if you want, browse up and down the list of projects, but instead you can actually search on, at the moment it's name and project ID, but we tend to expand that into other things as well, and the list will just reduce. So if I type Coles, for example, I get this Coles program and I can then browse and select, or instead I could type to Miranda, which you can see is not the start of the word, it's the end of the word, and you get that to select. So finding a project in the list and getting into it, because that's really where all the data is captured. You know, Unify sets up portfolio and program reporting, but only based on the fact that you've captured data against projects. I can then select that project and I'm now within the application itself, within the project, doing stuff, managing schedules, raising issues, creating documents, putting my time in, what have you. And you'll see again, there's the subnav concept coming in again, which we'll come back to with some of the other stuff further down. Another piece of functionality that is more prevalent than it used to be, but is possibly a little more subtle, we've had some feedback, we may change this, is search. So across every module, there's this search icon and it stays there. And so you can click on that and then free text search, and that does search a much broader range of keywords. And so when you're trying to access past projects, you would have to, obviously, the default view in the system is open phases. But if I go to my modal, I can change that to be all phases, or I can dive into my history, my archive by selecting complete. And then the search would kick in and you'd say, okay, potentially show me all jobs done for this client or with this project manager or what have you. And that would be a free text Google type search in there. And the results would then come into this data set down here. And then the final thing in terms of navigational change and interface change with this upgrade is the fact that the usual buttons are hidden. And so I'm just going to go into the issues module now, and you can see that I can add a new issue. That button is there, and obviously the look and feel of all of this stuff has been upgraded, but the navigation and the way you do things, save and drill, attach files, all of that concept is the same. But in the old system, if I'm in the Issues tab, you'll see, go into one, these buttons already exist, and they're bulk update buttons. So if I wanted to complete these issues, I'd do that and click complete. They appear contextually now. Because everything's so much bigger, the buttons would run into these filters. So the way we worked around that is that when you tick, because that's the only time you can use the buttons, is when you tick something, they suddenly appear and the filters disappear. And so you can get rid of them and the filters come back, or you tick them and you can say, right, I'm going to change the rating of those, or I'm going to reassign them to someone else or set the due date. They're a bulk update function and they only appear when you tick the box. The other key when you do upgrade, if you have Unify 12 now and you upgrade, to get that to happen, that's a JavaScript function, a bit of techo talk there. You have to refresh your screen, which removes the cached JavaScript. Otherwise, it's using Unify 12's JavaScript and the buttons won't appear. So you'll tick here and nothing would happen. You wouldn't get the button. So there's a little bit of a forced refresh. It's a little bit nuisance. You have to educate people on all of that. But what you do is you hold the Shift key down on your keyboard and you just hit the refresh button on the browser, and that will do the trick. Obviously, we've had calls and emails and things like that, and we answer those as part of our support. So if you forget that, you'll call us and find out what's going on. On that, I'm going to get back to square one again before I move on to the next part of the webinar. So I'm now back to the portfolio summary, which is my sort of default view. When you log into Unify, typically it's My Work Summary. Everyone logs into My Work Summary, and the idea then is to review what you need to do. It depends on how you're using the system. But that's the goal and the design philosophy behind that. So in summary, the big changes: no more filtering layer embedded in the screen. You need to use the pop-up modal. No more portfolio, my work tab. It's now a filtering option within the modal. A big project search to find the project that you want to work on. And the sub-modules are now the main modules in the application. Hamburger displays the reporting and the dashboards. And what else? That's pretty much it. That's the main change. Obviously, there's all the look and feel differences. Instead of panels, we used to call these things panels in the old system. They're now cards, and they lay themselves out a little differently. So if I drill in on a project details card, the timesheets card, the MPV, IRR card, interest, risks, project details, etc. These are called cards. In the old world, they would have been called panels. Project status, project details. And you can see some of the project status is now sub-nav rather than a panel itself. It's got its own screen. And we'll be exploring and expanding some functionality around that. Okay, that's it as far as the navigational changes go. So hopefully that will help when your upgrade comes, if it hasn't arrived already. And going back to all projects, we're going to start to do some features. I've got 8 features to go through, but they're not massive, and so they shouldn't take too long to go through. The first one is basically the ability to send an email out of Unify as an email rather than an attachment. So it used to do, and you can still do the old method, which is where you create a document in Unify, you email it to someone, it goes as an attachment to the email, and you can write some body text in the email to go out. Now you can still do that, or you can embed the actual document into the email itself. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to find a project I can do this on, my favourite, like the Shire. I'm going to go to the Documents module, and I'm going to create a document. And the document I'm going to create is a defence contract notice document. And you'll see as we create it, some text dynamically come into the system. And for those who are new to Unify, this will be a little bit of a demo of stuff that's been around for a while, but in the new interface. So I'm creating my document. The first step is a hidden step, but I'm going to use that as a template variable to create the date that's going to go into this document. The next step is auto-generated number. So when we sign this off, it'll generate a number that'll go into the document. I can link other documents to this document so that the two go together. I'm not going to do that in this instance, and I can even hide that as an output. But in this instance, it was referring to an incoming document that we received that we're responding to, so it kind of links the conversation. And then this is the key bit. It then automatically populates a whole bunch of information into this standard contract notice clause. So you can build these contract notice clauses as templates, which we've done here, and then when people create the document, it automatically populates. So you can see, you know, I didn't type anything in, and there's the document. You've got the program name, the project name, so it's a program and a project of works, the package number, the location, a whole bunch of stuff, the date, which is what we selected in the first step. There's also a template control called comments, which uses the issues system to feed back comments with people who don't have access to Unify. You can then email this to them, and they could potentially comment that bit in. And so that's there, and that's going to get included into this document. It doesn't have to be. I could hide it if I wanted to. And this one is, in case you didn't have this document generated in Unify and you wanted a register of all of these 8.3 notices, you could always upload the external Word version that you did just so that it's in as a repository. You can see that output is hidden because we've just generated the document ourselves. We're not creating it in Word and then uploading it into Unify, which is an alternate and inferior workflow. So then we get to the end step of a Unified document, and this is where the new stuff comes in. I'm going to go straight to signing this document off. Depending on the roles and the workflow configured, I may not have been able to do that. Might have only been able to mark it as a waiting sign-off. You'll see we've brought the email document button forward. And it's still there, but you just have to view the document first. So I click View Document, opens a new tab, and then the email icon is there. Instead of doing that now, I can just hit Email Document straight away. So it removes one step out of the process. And typically what that would do is it would send that document as an attachment, as a PDF attachment. So if I save this PDF instead manually, I'll open up that notice, and you can see it's got our letterhead and the contract notice as a PDF. And so that would go out, and whatever I emailed in the document itself down here, that would be the email body, but the attachment would be PDF. Instead, what I can do now as an alternative is just select this embedded text option, and then the Word document itself, the document we've created, comes in as a email. And you can just send that either to someone on the team, which means you just have to hit tick, but as these are fictitious people, I'm going to send it to myself, and that will now go off, and there'll be a transmittal around that at the bottom of the document. If I go back and view the document later, I scroll to the bottom. There'll be the record of that being sent out, and that person will get the email, and we'll probably see it pop up down the bottom right-hand side of my screen as the webinar progresses. But I did email it in test before, and where's it gone? And there it is there. So normally it's an attachment. Now it's embedded within the email itself, which, what users are going to use that for will be up to them. But we've got some clients who have people who don't have access to Unify. They want them to comment on the email text, so they're creating their own forms in Unify, emailing it out, and then you can actually comment in here as when you reply, you can comment in the comments boxes here and send that back, and then that gets saved using the Outlook plugin. You can save as issue here. There it is. It's just come in now, the one I sent, and you can save that back in against that document, so you've got a record of the response and the record of the document going out as a workflow. It took me ages to make sure there was nothing sensitive in that inbox. I don't know if we ended up succeeding in the meantime. The next one I think is a really cool feature as well. What you can do now in the Issues tab, so this is an Issues module. These filters have been there for a while. You can filter the list of issues down by category, and you can filter it by escalation or by status. And then these are all sortable as well. So if you wanted to sort by assigned to, you click on assigned to, and it sorts in alphabetical order. You can sort by category, or the default sort by rating. Now, that's great. And for a while, you've been able to link extra metadata information to categories. So in Unify, you can configure your own lists and associate those to issues. A common one is a defects list, the type, or a variation and the type of variation, or safety and the type of safety incident. The problem in the past is that's great for capturing. So for example, if I click in on this particular type of issue, this is a safety issue, but the type of safety list, that doesn't exist out of the box. You need to create that yourself as an end user configuring the tool. Once you've done that, you can link it to a category called safety, and it appears here to select. Wasn't much you could do with it after that. Now what you can do is configure it to appear in the list. So what happens is if I actually select safety as a category, I get a safety register of all the things that have gone wrong from a safety perspective on this project, but I also get that list filter on as well. So show me the reportable ones. And you can also in the dashboard report on this stuff as well, and in the document controls, but just in terms of managing it within a dashboard, you can now create your own list. So again, if I select, for example, defects, there's the floor level that the defect belongs to, and I can filter for all the level 2. Now that's a list that we created as an end user, not something that's been developed as part of the product itself. So you can configure the product to have this functionality for your particular purpose. And when you consider the broad uses of Unify, we can't build fields for every person's use, but there is a capability for you to do that. And for those who have never been system administrator, I'll just quickly show that as well. And for those who are administrators on the call, you'll see this configuration now has all the things that you can configure in Unify, and you can see it's quite a long list. So the tax rates make it geographically agnostic. You can set your own rates around the world. And if I go to the Issues tab, you'll see a sub-navigation. That's where the categories got created. And the issue custom fields get created there as well. And you'll see defect category has its own list somewhere here. There it is, floor level. And that list was created somewhere else. And we say, under Use as Filter, this is the new functionality in Unify 13. We mark that as a yes. So what that means is that whenever we select that category, that list will appear as something we can filter in the dashboard itself. The safeties list is filterable as well. And that's how easy it is to create these things. We've done a whole bunch around scheduling. Now, Unify, our philosophy is that collaboration around issues and risks is what drives progress on a project, and we only really want to track high-level scheduling. But when you consider that some of our deployments have these projects as being activities, you can actually get quite detailed scheduling as well. And so to access the schedule, it's in the Summary tab, and you'll see, this has been there for forever and a day, that scheduling in our system is initially based off your own life cycle that you create. So this is a construction-based life cycle that includes a pre-sale phase for the company that's bidding for work. And you can schedule that up from a baseline and an actual forecast, and it provides a little Gantt chart of that information. Sitting underneath that is milestones. So when we select milestones, you can then create bespoke milestones. You can also create templated milestones. That's a new one and feature in Unify. It's a standard set of milestones. And they will then drop in to the relevant phases you can see here, and dropping in under the construction phase, because that's the way the dates line up. That was all existing in Unify 12. What you're now able to do is link those milestones to a life cycle phase. So, for example, if I was to push out, that's linked to the construction phase. I'll just go back to schedule for a moment. We can see that construction is forecasted to finish in 2019. I go to the milestones linked to it, and I say that's now not going to be done until 2020. That's a big change, I know, but it's easy to demonstrate the point. And I go back to the schedule. It's now 4th of April 2020. So those two phases are linked, and they're linked by that drop-down list. And equally, you can go one level further down, and if I go into the Issues module, I can select an issue. I'm filtered for defects here, but it doesn't matter. I'll select it. And I scroll down, you'll see link to milestone, and there's the same list of milestones. And if they're linked to a life cycle phase, and I push out the date, cascades all the way through. And so milestones are updated and life cycle phases are updated. So that could be a little bit dangerous, a little bit scary. You don't have to do it, but it's there and it's new and it's worth noting. One of the other things is linked to another webinar I did last year, so I won't spend too much time on it, but what we've done in Unify 13 is create a whole bunch of flat style reports. And so if I go into my reporting module, all the way along these different ones, you'll find the word export in them. So, for example, in here, if you scroll down, there'll be project summary export. And so what that is there to do is to extract a subset of the information in Unify that you can then link in Excel or in Tableau or in Power BI and create visual reports. And so when I run this, I would typically run it to Excel. And it's basically going to give me all the metadata around a project. Up my list, my portfolio of projects, that is. And so it's flat. It's not something you would use on its own. It's something you would do something with. And so in an Excel perspective, the easiest one for me to demonstrate that is actually timesheet export. But as an aggregate, you could do a pivot table on agreed fee or fee budget and aggregate that across very quickly within Excel actually. So I won't do the timesheet. I'll just do this one. If I hit pivot table, it automatically knows the range. We know we're a database, and I can start to say, okay, for all the project types, tell me the sum of the budget, and you're done. You might want to format that. Something currency. And then, of course, you could, once you've set up these pivot tables, all you need to do is replace this data from the export over the top, and all of your pivot tables will refresh. So that gives you a bit of power over the type of reporting that you can do. In Power BI and in Tableau, you can link those two together. So, for example, in this particular Power BI presentation that I did, which you can see the webinar on this online, you can see that I've linked 4 different spreadsheets over here: project risk, export, summary, resource roles, and timesheets. And they can be combined and joined together to create these reports. So you run 3 or 4 different extracts out of Unify, and then you can start to create this type of functionality, which is looking at the number of risks by category, by the status that they're in, whereabouts in the world they're occurring, and what they're treated and the treated rating is by category. So that's by project type there actually. So that's how you can link. That's linking to the project summary report and the risk export report to get that to happen. That way you get to utilize the matrix structure of Unify when you're tagging projects with metadata. 3 more things to show you very quickly. We have redone our resource planning function, so it's completely new, completely different, and in our attempt to simplify it. So now it is literally, on this project, these people are working, and we expect them to be doing Eric to be doing 20 hours a week. These are weekly periods through that period, and you can set up bulk updates of that information through the ad, but it's something to explore probably outside of the realm of this presentation, but just be aware that there's a completely new resource planning interface to utilize. We have expanded the resource rate functionality quite extensively. You have always been able to set up classifications and have rates against classifications, but now you can go even richer than that. When you're looking at a person, you can calculate their rates automatically or per classification or manually. And so you'll see down here, their charge rate and cost rate are there at the moment by classification. If I change that to manual, I'll do the cost one to manual. You're now able to just type in, once I hit save, you can then type into that and just change it to whatever rate you want. So if you're calculating your rates outside of Unify, and also you can use automatic, and that will then rely on the employment type and this one here, the multiplier that you're using. And now when I hit save, that number will change. I'll need to give them a salary. So you put people's salaries in, you select what role they're in and what employment type they have, full-time, part-time, and it'll calculate the rate. It's now $76.67. All of that gets tracked. So you can see here there's a rate history of, there's the $140 that I manually keyed in, that got recorded, and there's the $76.67. And then you can remove those if irrelevant. And what Unify does is when calculating profitability, it uses the rates. So it'll use 0 and 0 between 2014 and 7th of April 2016. It'll then use 150 and 75. Well, actually, charge rates don't get used at all. They're just indicative for estimating purposes. The 75 is what's used to calculate the cost base for that person. And that will happen between April and July, and then from July 2016 to February, it use these rates here. So you can adjust those dates and remove things in the rate history. But every time you set them up and change them, it records that transaction for your purposes. And so, yeah, a lot more sophistication around rates, a lot more sophistication around, well, simplified resource planning so that you can actually get to an end answer and see what your strategic profile is, whether you need to start recruiting people or not in the next 2 to 3 months. It's pretty much the goal of our resource planning module. It also gives you the ability to get an estimate of completion, which brings in earned value, which is another piece of functionality there. But I think if I went on that, I'd probably have people dropping off the phone like crazy. So lots more functionality around that and more to come. But the main focus on this was the interface. Hopefully the presentation at the beginning, you were fresh enough to absorb the changes, and that when you get upgraded, it will be a relatively simple thing. I'm now going to unmute you all, and you can bombard me with questions. Once someone started asking a question, please, if you started to at the same time, hold back and we'll get through them as we go. So I'll also end the recording on that note, because the Q&A can be pretty crazy for a recording.